All right, what's up, everybody? How's it going? Let's go ahead and get started. I'll give a few minutes for folks to get the notification and get going here. I'm pretty excited to share with you guys about this trip. It's pretty awesome. Give me one quick second. I think I need to fix my chat. Hey, Phil. Driftiest follower. I'm doing great. How about yourself? You were an hour from Vicksburg. Oh, man. Too bad you couldn't have come and joined us. We had 12 of us that were there. It was awesome. We had a great time together. We got to see quite a bit of the battlefield. Got to see the USS Cairo as well, which is the only surviving gunboat from the Civil War. Sharpshooter, greetings in Hull, England. Lake District in the UK, very cool. Hello from Vicksburg, Eric. What's up, man? Yeah, so I'm just going to tell you a little bit about my experiences in Vicksburg and how it changed my perception of the campaign. John, we ended up, we actually had two guys there, one who was a former park ranger and one who's a current park ranger. And Ryan in particular, who was the former park ranger, who was the one who lent me his Union uniform to use for many of the videos and has a degree in history, was fantastic and was able to give so much insight. And I'm really grateful to both of those guys for giving of their time to help out with that, because they knew so much more about the Vicksburg battlefield than I knew, having never been there before. So we're going to talk about, just talk a little bit about the Vicksburg campaign and how my visit there has kind of changed my perception about some things. I'm excited to start sharing with you guys the videos that I shot from those sites, and I'll tell you a little bit about what you can expect from those, and we'll do some Q&A as well. The only thing I'm going to ask you guys is that we keep the conversation focused on what I'm talking about Vicksburg. So if you have questions that aren't related to that, I probably won't answer them for now, just at least until we get through this. And then if we have time at the end, great. It'll probably only be about a 45-minute stream or so today. All right, so got into Vicksburg. It was hot all week. You know, I'm a Northeast Ohio guy, so I am not used to the humidity of Mississippi. And that's really my first takeaway is, you know, I was wearing a T-shirt underneath that wool coat that the Union soldiers were wearing, and the Confederate soldiers for that matter. And the second I put that on, even at 10 o'clock in the morning, I just sweat. Like if I wore it for 15 minutes and took it off, my T-shirt was soaked in that humidity. I can't imagine what those guys, you know, wearing those things for months. The one Union soldier whose diary I was using to help inform what I was doing talked about how they had been wearing the same clothes for a month without changing, just how gross that must have been. Carlos, I just planned this trip about a month and a half ago. No, the weather was not cool during the battle. I mean, we're talking June in Mississippi. It is not cool. And with the humidity, what it is, the temperature feels much hotter than what it actually is. So when I was there and it was 90, they said that the real feel temperature, because of the humidity, what it felt like was like 107. And that's just kind of how it is. Yeah, M1 Abrams, we're going to be talking about Vicksburg and my trip and just kind of the experiences. So, yeah, at Vicksburg itself, we met at about 10 o'clock, I think about closer to 10:30 by the time we actually went into the battlefield. And I think we were there till about 3 or so before we went and grabbed something to eat. So we spent about 4.5 hours on the battlefield. But that was just that one day. I was also in Vicksburg 2 days before that and a day after that. Some of the things you'll see in my videos, I went over to where they were building the canal, which was right here, and showed what remains of that canal that they tried to build. This is not where the Mississippi River is anymore. It actually does not go this way. So the area where Farragut, or not Farragut, I keep saying Farragut, the area where Porter ran the guns, is still water, but it's not the Mississippi River anymore. But you'll see that where they ran the guns. You'll see where that ditch is that they tried to bypass the river there. I shot a ton of video at Grand Gulf. There's a lot to see in Grand Gulf. Grand Gulf's really cool. Kyle, how's it going? So Grand Gulf is where there were 2 forts at Grand Gulf. Fort Coben, and I can't remember off the top of my head the name of the other one, but you'll see both of them in my video. And this was next to Vicksburg. It was one of the most powerful defensive positions the Confederates had along the river. This is where the Big Black River empties into the Mississippi, is at Grand Gulf. And they've got like a good bit of the original town of Grand Gulf, the parts that weren't burned, still there, and you can actually go tour it. And it's really cool to see all these old buildings and everything. They've also got this museum, and you'll see video from the museum, a ton of stuff that they've pulled up from the Mississippi River or that they've found around the battlefield. So many artifacts. Because once the gunboats ran the guns at Vicksburg, they came down to shell Grand Gulf because Grant was going to, you can see here, he was gonna cross at Grand Gulf. But they couldn't silence Fort Coben, which was this fort that was up over the Mississippi River, kind of like Vicksburg is. So they decided to go a couple miles south and land at Bruinsburg. What was for lunch after the battle? There were 6 of us that went to Cracker Barrel. Yeah, so really, really cool. It was pretty cool, the visit. And I cannot wait for you guys. You guys will probably see the first video in the next couple of days to this. There's a lot of editing I'm going to have to do, and there's going to be 2 series of videos. First battle then is fought at Port Gibson. Vicksburg's in Mississippi, and it's actually across the river from Louisiana. It's quite a ways from Tennessee. A couple hour drive anyway. So, Port Gibson, holy cow. And the one thing I will say just right off the bat, I was already impressed by Grant's Vicksburg campaign, and you've heard me say before that to me this was the most brilliant campaign of the entire war on either side. I'm doubling down on that now that I've actually been there, because I am significantly more impressed by what Grant and his army pulled off now that I've been there and seen where they did this. Just, oh my gosh, just absolutely incredible. I have seen the Blue and Gray, the Gray with Stacy Keach. I love that series. So, Port Gibson makes the Wilderness look like downtown Richmond, is what I've been saying to people. The Wilderness, which everybody talks about the Wilderness in the East as this battle where it was tough because you had, these wilderness roads going through the woods and all this stuff like that. Not even close to the wilderness that is Port Gibson. So Port Gibson, there were 2 roads that ran from Bruinsburg to Port Gibson. One went along kind of this northerly route that went right along Bayou Pierre, and the other one went kind of straight into Port Gibson. And so Grant had to send his army down these 2 roads. And when you see the videos that I shot there, you'll understand what I mean. At the Port Gibson battlefield, I was 5 miles from the nearest paved road, and that's today. Imagine what it was 150 years ago. There were areas where I was driving on dirt roads, and the dirt, there were like cliffs 10 feet high on either side of the road, and I'm driving down through the dirt between these kind of walls of mud that were that high. And this is the battlefield. David Dixon Porter is the naval commander for this campaign. They do have the gunboat on display, and when I get to talking about Vicksburg, I'll tell you about that. It was really, really cool. Eleanor, thank you. Appreciate that. Legend has it Mr. Beep might show up today. Interesting. Speaking of that, Mr. Beat, totally off topic, emailed me the other day. A bunch of his followers had told him about my reaction videos, and we are going to try to meet, and we're going to do a collab of some kind. So, very nice guy. We had a great conversation back and forth. He could not have been kinder, despite the fact that I was kind of critical of him in those videos. So, collab coming with Mr. Beat at some point. Opinion of General Ord. You don't hear much about General Ord, but Grant thought very highly of him because, number one, when he replaced McClernand during this campaign, Ord is who he replaced him with. And then when he goes east to fight Lee, he takes Ord with him. So he thought very highly of Ord, yeah. All right, so anyway, Port Gibson, incredible accomplishment winning that battle. The area they fought over there was just ridiculously wilderness. Like, it's solid woods, dirt roads, no civilization anywhere. Like, I was not sure I was even on the right road because there was just nothing there at all. It was crazy, but they do have some markers and some different things like that. So really impressed by the Port Gibson victory. Once they win Port Gibson, the garrison at Grand Gulf actually has to fall back because they can't hold it from land. There was a Confederate brigade that marched 27 miles in 40 hours down from Vicksburg to get down to defend Grand Gulf and to actually fight at Port Gibson, but it was too little too late. Am I going to comb my hair like Mr. Beat does for the collaboration? No, I don't think so. I do not think McClellan's tactic of not doing anything was understandable, especially in light of how much Grant did with so little. You got to understand, during this campaign, Grant is outnumbered, okay? He is cutting himself off from his supply line. His army marches something like 150 miles and fights 5 battles against 2 different armies in 17 days on 5 days of rations, living off the land, cut off from supply. It is a ridiculous feat, and I defy any other general to have pulled it off. And even his own generals, like Sherman, was convinced it was a terrible idea. It was going to fail miserably. But he told Grant, he said, I will support this plan as if it were my own. But understand, I don't think it's going to work. McPherson was, in fact, my ancestor, whose unit I followed for a second set of videos we're going to do, was in the 17th Corps under McPherson. Yeah, he was the 17th Corps commander. The 3 Corps commanders under Grant were Sherman, McClernand, and McPherson. Right about the time that they surround Vicksburg, about halfway into the siege, McClernand is relieved of command and replaced by Ord. What was the food ration like in the Civil War? Well, I can tell you a little bit about what was happening here. For the most part, these guys had something that you could charitably call a cracker that was called hardtack that they would often carry with them. A lot of times coffee, sugar, flour, things like that. Grant basically, for the rations for this campaign, there was 2 or 3 different times they were given 2 days of rations. But for the most part, they foraged and lived off the land. They just tried to find whatever they could. The diaries I read, they're a lot of times finding chickens and hogs and things like that. Edward, no, we're keeping this focused on what we're talking about right now. No, I am not a teacher, but I did go to school to be one. All right, so they take Port Gibson. And so at this point, if you want to do kind of a comparison to like D-Day, this is when they've established their beachhead, okay? You know, he's now got Port Gibson, he's now got Grand Gulf, and so now what they can do is they can start bringing supplies across. McClernand's Corps, to his credit, and I don't like McClernand at all, built a 70-mile corduroy road, which is basically laid down wood planks, because you got to understand, this ground out here is all swamp. And you'll see some in the video of how just brutal this ground is for marching across. So they build a 70-mile corduroy road to be able to transport supplies down. They give the army a couple of days' rations, and then Grant decides to send, to kind of fake like he's going north straight for Vicksburg to hold Pemberton in place. But then he goes toward Jackson because Joe Johnston is over here with an army in Jackson. And so this is one of the brilliant moments of this campaign, is when Grant decides, instead of going to lay siege to Vicksburg, he decides he's going to go hit Jackson first so he can drive Johnston off and then turn around and go after Pemberton. Meanwhile, Johnston is in Jackson sending Pemberton messages saying, get out of Vicksburg. Take your army and hit Grant now, because if he surrounds you, you're going to get bottled up in the city and you're going to lose 30,000 men. And so Johnston knew that and was trying to link up so that they could outnumber Grant. But Pemberton is a loyal guy to Jefferson Davis, and Jefferson Davis has told Pemberton to hold Vicksburg at all costs, which is stupid. Did Grant ever personally shoot in the battle? During the Mexican War, he would have, but I doubt during Vicksburg, or I doubt during the Civil War. Grant thought very highly of Joe Johnston as a general. And in fact, what's interesting is Johnston, of all the Confederate generals, was the only one who was a general in the U.S. Army before the war started. He was a quartermaster general, brigadier general. Best general in the Civil War, in my opinion, Grant. Yeah, and Sweets, one of the things that Grant learned in his debacle in his first attempt to try and take Vicksburg back in 1862 was that they could live off the land. He realized there was so much there in Mississippi that was possible, and so he understood he could do that. So they wait here a while, and I think they're like a week or so in the Port Gibson area while he's kind of building up supply. He's got to wait for Sherman stayed up in Vicksburg while McClernand and McPherson crossed down here to hold Pemberton from hitting Grant. Once they've got themselves established, Sherman comes down. All three corps are there. Yeah, Grierson's raid, Cyrus, is actually going on during all of this. So Grierson's cavalry had actually, it's not on this map, but gone on a raid out in this direction, and they eventually go all the way down to Louisiana. And that's another reason why the Confederates can't consolidate and go after Grant during all of this. Beep, what's up? Good to see you. All right, so this is 1863. John, you have that backwards. It was Johnston who died because he wouldn't wear a hat at Sherman's funeral. And when someone told him to put on his hat, he said Sherman wouldn't do it. You know, Sherman would do the same for me. But Sherman died first. It was Johnston who got sick after going to Sherman's funeral. Is there anything both generals could have done better? Yeah, and I'll get to that. For Pemberton, it was he should have left. He should have combined with Johnston, and they should have attacked Grant down here. If they'd have done that, it might have been a different outcome because the Confederates did outnumber Grant at this point. Grant had about 40,000 men. Actually, before Sherman got there, Grant only had maybe 25,000 men. And between Pemberton and Johnston, they had nearly 50,000 men. They could have outnumbered Grant 2-1 and hit him. So that's the main thing. I don't think Texas was one of the last states to be part of the CSA. Texas joined the Confederate States before Virginia, Arkansas, Tennessee, North Carolina did. That Pemberton is not related to the inventor of Coca-Cola. Nebulous, I'll respond to you when I get a chance. Okay, hey Alexander, thank you, appreciate that. Ken Burns' Civil War documentary is fantastic, and I think still the standard on documentaries, and kind of almost like single-handedly changed the genre. And he's got some other really good documentaries too. So they march out like around the 8th or so of May, and they get up across here, and they're kind of skirmishing with the Confederates the whole time, who are trying to harass them. And then what happens here is you've got McPherson coming up this road. I think McClernand's coming from over here, and Sherman is kind of holding the Confederates in place. And so there's a brigadier general in charge of a brigade in Raymond, which is 10, 12 miles from Jackson. Matthew, thank you. Appreciate that. Hopefully we'll get to connect some other time down the road. So this General Gregg, Confederate general, has a brigade, and he hears that there's a Union brigade headed toward Raymond. And my 5th great-grandfather is in this brigade that's headed toward Raymond. It's under a guy named Elias Dennis. And so he thinks, okay, it's a single Union brigade. This is my chance. And so he attacks. He ambushes them right outside of Raymond, and you'll see a lot of video from this battle. But what he doesn't realize is he's not running into a single Union brigade. He's running into Dennis's brigade, which is the lead brigade of 6 brigades under McPherson, 2 divisions. And so this lone Confederate brigade ends up taking on 6. But for the 20th Ohio Infantry, which is my ancestors' unit, this was like this in Atlanta on July 22nd, 1864, are their 2 bloodiest battles for them. They lose more men at Raymond than they lose at Champion Hill or during the assault at Vicksburg. Do I believe Grant was a better general than the Confederate generals? I believe he certainly performed better than any of them. I can't think of a Confederate general that I think did a better job than Grant. Yeah, these roads are not very wide. And you'll see some of that in the video. So they win at Raymond, and Raymond is a significant battle because from there, he's got the road wide open to Jackson. Grant takes Jackson. Johnston basically abandons the capital and gives it up to Grant. But then Grant turns this way. So here's what happens. What do I think would have happened if Grant failed? He would have been replaced probably by McClernand, and the West would have been in big, big trouble. Texas was one of the last states to be restored to the Union. Oh, gotcha. Okay. So it's at this point when Grant has taken Jackson and starts heading towards Vicksburg that Pemberton finally decides to come out. Now, when you see the videos, Raymond is a cool battlefield because it's very small. The whole battlefield's only about 1 brigade wide, and it looks exactly like it did at the time, and it's very well preserved. And I was able to make some great videos there, including with my drone. So that was a lot of fun. So I can't wait for you to see that. And the other thing, and you may have heard me mention this already. Yeah, Ryan, you're probably right. Even McClernand whips Pemberton. Your 13-year-old daughter whips Pemberton. Fair point. Fair point. And Ryan, guys, by the way, is the one whose uniform I got to use for all of this. Ryan was a huge, huge help to me in helping me to be able to do these videos. And so when you see these videos that I made from the Vicksburg campaign, especially the ones about the 20th Ohio, Ryan's a big reason why they're going to be as good as they are. He lives down there in Jackson and was a big help, especially when we toured the battlefield. So, do I think they got all the dead? No, I'm sure there are certainly people still buried around there. So, as I mentioned before, I'm doing 2 series from Vicksburg. One is going to just be showing you all the battlefields and talking about what was happening in all of those battlefields. Didn't get to the Big Black River Bridge, but you'll see Grand Gulf, you'll see Grant's Canal, you'll see Vicksburg, you'll see Port Gibson, you'll see a little bit of Champion Hill. Most of that is private land, and so there's only so much you can see there. You'll see Raymond, and you'll see a little bit in Jackson as well. But then the second series of videos, Osborne Oldroyd, who was in the 20th Ohio Infantry, which is part of Logan's division of McPherson's Corps, kept a daily diary that he kept at the time. So every night, after Port Gibson, that night, he sat down and was writing about what happened that day for their unit in Port Gibson. He wrote about his bunkmate, his best friend, being killed at Raymond right next to him with a bullet to the brain. He talks about what they thought of McPherson, McClernand, Sherman, Grant, others. He talks about the rumors they're hearing about what's happening with the Confederates. Talks about the rations. Talks about the foraging. It's an incredible look into what the common soldiers were doing during the Vicksburg campaign. And so in Ryan's uniform that he loaned to me, I'm at these locations like Port Gibson and Raymond and Champion Hill and Vicksburg, reading his diary and letting you know what these guys thought. So that'll be a completely separate series of video. We still there? Looks like everything's still working. What were the casualties like for this campaign? I want to say that the whole campaign, including the siege of Vicksburg, Grant loses, I want to say, 10,000 men. Give me 1 second, guys. All right, I think we're good. I don't think it's your internet, Mr. Beep. I think it might be mine. There's something about Sundays for some reason with my streams. I don't know why it's only on Sunday. There we go. Thank you, Ryan. So perfect example when you look at the statistics from these battles and you see killed and wounded, like Ryan said, keep in mind a lot of these wounded would end up dying. These are mortally wounded. So, for example, at Gettysburg, officially, someone like Lewis Armistead would have been listed as wounded because he lived for several days after the battle. But he, of course, ended up dying. So the 20th Ohio at Raymond, for example, they lost 10 killed, but 7 of the men who were listed as wounded ended up dying in the next couple of weeks. So it was officially 17 killed and mortally wounded. So those numbers can be a little confusing because of that, because a lot of those wounded would end up dying. The sound's off. Yes. Yeah, so guys, one of the guys who was there on our tour, he had an ancestor in the 3rd Louisiana, which was the unit that was exactly opposite the 20th Ohio on the siege lines, which is where my ancestor was. So that was pretty crazy. And we're all Americans now, but during that time, Ryan had a bunch of ancestors, a ton of ancestors in Mississippi units. All right, so Pemberton finally decides, and you guys understand, as brilliant as Grant was on this campaign, Pemberton was equally as stupid. Pemberton never had a combat command. He was an engineer that was a favorite of Jefferson Davis. He had served under Davis in the pre-war army. And so he had been placed in charge of coastal fortifications, Georgia, South Carolina, that area. And Jefferson Davis puts him in command of the defenses of Vicksburg for the same reason, because he's good with that kind of thing. He's not so good being a lieutenant general in command of 30,000 men. What was the North's biggest mistake in the Civil War? Putting McClellan in command of the army, I think. That's just off the top of my head. But so Pemberton made a lot of mistakes, and if Joe Johnston had been in command, it might have been a different outcome. So anyway, he finally comes out, and on the eve of the Battle of Champion Hill, and actually it might have even been the morning of May 16th, he gets a 2-day-old message from Joe Johnston saying, link up with me, I want to say in Clinton, because Johnston was leaving, and he wanted to kind of link up with him. And so then Pemberton's like, oh, okay, I guess I'll do that. He was originally planning to march down to try and cut off Grant's supply, not knowing that Grant had actually cut himself off from his own supply at that point. And so he, right in the middle of this march south to cut off Grant's supply, he gets this message from Johnston, and so he's like, all right, turn the whole army around. And so he's decides to turn the army around right as the lead elements of Grant's army start arriving and skirmishing with him near Champion Hill. And so he kind of ends up having to rush into this battle when he was not ready for it. It was just debacle from start to finish, and the only debacle that might be worse than how things were handled the morning of Champion Hill is probably what happened at Big Black River Bridge, when after they fall back from Champion Hill, they build their fortifications on the east side of the river. And so rather than putting the river between them and Grant, they put themselves between Grant and the river. So then when they get attacked, they have to try and retreat across the river, and it was just a mess. Yeah, Mississippi does have a new flag. Todd, yes. Actually, you'll see in the video, I will talk about Orion Howe. Do I know much more? Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah, because you were there with us. Alexander, thank you. Appreciate that. Oh, yeah, I've been to the Shenandoah Valley, but it's been a long time. So Orion Howe, yeah, I did learn a little bit more about him. There were, I think, 3 guys. Ryan can correct me on this if I'm wrong, but I think there were 3 volunteers that were sent to try and go get help to get ammunition. What I ended up finding out was he was the only one that survived and made it through to Sherman. Apparently they got the wrong ammunition, though. It was like the wrong caliber or something. I don't remember the details of that, but yeah, a pretty cool story. And it was decades later before he got the Medal of Honor. It was like in the 1880s or 1890s when he got the Medal of Honor. Yes, Zach, actually that was what I thought of, was that situation in the Napoleonic Wars with the river to the back when it happened here, Big Black. I have seen the Grant documentary on the History Channel. So then they fall back into the city, and at that point, the fate of Vicksburg is really kind of sealed. No, I didn't, Matt. I couldn't make it to New Orleans. I flew into Jackson. So, honestly, I wish I would have had more time in the Vicksburg area. I needed like 3 more days to do everything I wanted to do. The battlefield part closed at 5, so I didn't have evenings to do anything. Am I a gun expert in the Civil War? No, I wouldn't consider that I am. Duck, I'm not talking about General Lee. He wasn't at Vicksburg. John, that's the way people talked. That was just the way you signed letters at the time. It was like sincerely. Thank you, Ryan. I thought there was something with the caliber of ammo. 58 caliber would have been what mini balls were, I believe. Yes, Eric, I do plan to return to Vicksburg at some point, for sure. All right, so at this point, I mean, it's kind of sealed. The fate is sealed, but here's where Grant makes one of his first missteps, but I don't blame him for making the decision that he does. If Grant had a fault during the war, I would say a tendency to underestimate his enemy or underestimate the situation. And he seems to have done that at different times. So he arrives, and this is what I say when I mentioned earlier about this being, this is kind of blitzkrieg warfare. I mean, Grant lands at Port Gibson on May 1st. And he sets out from there, like around the 8th or the 9th, I think it was, maybe even the 10th. In the span of a little over a week, they march all the way up to Raymond. They fight at Raymond, they fight at Jackson, they fight at Champion Hill, and they fight at Big Black River Bridge. And they do all of this on little rations. It's just an incredible feat of an army to do that. And Grant's army's morale was sky high. You read what these guys were writing, and they over and over again say, we know we're going to win because Grant doesn't lose. Like, they had 110% confidence in their commander that they were going to win. And so they get there, and likewise, the opposite is true with the Confederates. At this point, before the attacks at Vicksburg, Confederate morale is very low. They are not feeling great about their chances. They've been pushed. the Union Army, including Grant, all thought we're going to take Vicksburg in a couple of days. They thought it was going to be over like that. So they get there, and so Grant decides he's going to assault before they get a chance to really organize their defenses. Now you have to remember that kind of like Hitler's Atlantic Wall, they've had a while to build these defenses. They've been working on the defenses around Vicksburg for the better part of a year. And when you see the videos, this is one of the big takeaways for me from visiting there. It's not like Petersburg, okay? If you ever go to Petersburg, you see the siege lines. You know, it's all fairly even ground. There's some hills and things like that. Vicksburg is ridiculous ground. I mean, it is, you know, I've said often that the area that the Confederates attacked on July 2nd at Gettysburg is some of the worst ground I ever saw. I would attack over that ground any day before I would touch Vicksburg. I mean, that is the worst ground I've ever seen. And it's not even close. I have never seen worse ground to attack across on a battlefield in my entire life than the siege lines at Vicksburg. Imagine big ravines with really narrow approaches at fortified positions. That's what Vicksburg is. There's 9 forts around the city on the strategic locations, and Grant can't really go around them. He can't attack in between them because the forts are at the only places where you can actually attack because of the terrain. No, Gettysburg, I would attack up the face of Little Round Top any day of the week before I would attack at Vicksburg. It was that bad. Absolutely that bad. The tunnels aren't there. Jeffrey, the ground at Vicksburg it's not real solid. There's a lot of erosion there, and parts of the battlefield are actually closed because of that erosion. Thank you, Alexander. Lawler was very important to the campaign, and Ryan might be able to answer that better than I can. But one of the places you'll see prominently in my videos was where Lawler was involved in one of the approaches. But, man, it's I could not believe what I was seeing when I saw the ground at Vicksburg. It was, Eric, that is actually not true. That gets talked about all the time, that whole thing with Vicksburg not celebrating the 4th of July. I've seen records of them having 4th of July celebrations as early as 1908. I know that was even mentioned in the Civil War, in Ken Burns's documentary, that they didn't celebrate it until World War II, but it's actually not true. So with the Confederates, they have these fortifications, right? They've got redans and redoubts, and you know, they've got these incredible strong forts. And then down in they dig moats. You know, they've got these long, you know, slopes in front of them, and then they would put defensive works down in those, and they would cut trees down and just made all kinds of obstacles. It was absolutely impossible to march an army at these locations and keep any kind of a battle line whatsoever. Plus the Mississippi heat, absolutely, and humidity. Yes, sir, Ellis. Great win for West Brom. Alex Mowat might be my new favorite player. Tom, thank you. Yeah, so when you see this, and I hope that it comes across on the video, just how ridiculously awful the approaches were to attack. And so they attack on May 19th. They attack again on May 22nd. Both of them are complete disasters. Very, very, very one-sided casualties. I mean, we're talking thousands of casualties for Grant's army, and we're talking like less than 100 dead on the Confederate side in a couple of these attacks. Yeah, it was... If you ever get the chance... Vicksburg might be my new favorite battlefield that I've ever visited, because it's just incredible. It is an absolutely incredible. The only thing I wish, and I know Ryan would be the first one to say this, I wish it looked more like it did in 1863 because there's trees in a lot of places. The places where the trees are cleared out and it looks like it did in 1863 is some of the best preserved and some of the most amazing Civil War battlefield I've ever seen anywhere. And I've been to almost all the big battlefields now. But unfortunately, a lot of it's trees, and so you can't really get a sense of what it looked like. You know, like my ancestors' unit, they talk about seeing the Confederate flag on the courthouse from where they were, and you can't see the city at all from where they were now. Ryan, that's right. He was the guy with his coat off and sleeves rolled up at Big Black River. I just listened to that part of the audiobook the other day. But yeah, so Grant launches these 2 attacks, and it's pretty clear, especially after the second attack, that it's beyond irresponsible to continue assaulting these positions, especially when you've got control of the river and you've got reinforcements arriving every day. And so at the time they kind of settle into Vicksburg, Pemberton's got 30,000 men. Grant doesn't have much more than that. He's got maybe 40,000. And so the whole south end of the works are actually open. Like, Grant doesn't have enough men to cover the whole line. But he starts getting reinforcements all the time. And so by the time Vicksburg surrenders in July, he's got like nearly 80,000 men. So Pemberton's best chance was gone the minute they got surrounded. Varick, yes, it was awesome meeting all of you guys. It was so cool. I did get to see the Shirley House. Yeah, there were 12 folks that came out and joined us for the tour. It was so great. Let me see if I can find. I don't have my videos on this computer, but I want to see if I can try and find. Like you can see here, there's Stockade Redan. Here's the 3rd Louisiana, which is where Logan's division was the one that my ancestor was in. And you know, there's these places on the battlefield that are incredible. The National Cemetery is like up around here. Let me see if I can maybe find some pictures to show you guys. And there's I've had this as my background for a while. That's the 20th Ohio Monument at Vicksburg. Let me see what I can find. Maybe find you a photo or something, and I can try to help explain this a little bit. And yeah, by the way, the Cairo is there too, and I can't wait for you guys to see that part, that video from the Cairo. It's really quite something to be able to see that. All right, that's not a good angle to show you. Probably one of the best spots on the battlefield is there, though. So that's the Illinois Monument. If you've ever been to Gettysburg, they have the Pennsylvania Monument that has the names of all the Pennsylvania soldiers. This Illinois Monument has the same thing. There were like 36,000 Pennsylvania soldiers or Illinois soldiers at the battle, and their names are all there. Let me see if I can find a good view of this. It's hard to find a good view to let you see what I'm talking about. And you can see here, when am I coming to England? I'm not entirely sure yet, but why do I believe Vicksburg was more important or as important as, for example, Gettysburg? I think, number one, Vicksburg was really super important because it was the defeat of, first of all, it was the defeat and surrender of 30,000 Confederate troops. It, along with Port Hudson, means that the Confederacy is cut in half, and the Western Confederacy, from which a lot of food and supplies come, is now cut off by the river. The Union now has control of the Mississippi River, which is huge for them being able to navigate and kind of move around. And honestly, I don't think that the victory at Gettysburg changed a whole lot in the East dramatically. Man, it's tough to find a really good image. This is the area I want to show you, but I can't find a good shot of it that shows the territory in between. This is actually flatter than a lot of the areas. Oh yeah, Duck. Ryan's 100% right. There's no comparison on the terrain. The terrain 110% favored the Confederates in this battle, which is why Grant decided to camp them out, or out-camp them, I think he said, for that very reason. I can't seem to find a good view anywhere. So I guess you'll just have to wait until you see the videos of it. Yeah, also on that monument is Frederick Dent Grant. Grant's wife and son were there. More Federals were killed during the assault on the 3rd Louisiana Redan than the Confederates killed when they blew the mine. That were killed when they blew the mine. Yeah, that makes sense. So you see this house right here. This is kind of cool. That house right there is this house right here in this picture. Same place. This is all woods now. I wanted to get a shot of this to let you see how it looks today, but it's all woods now. The road that goes through the national park goes right along right here, and the 3rd Louisiana Redan is just to the left here. My favorite part of the battlefield is that spot that I'm trying to show you, because number one, it's where my ancestor was, but it's also the field. I believe that's also the spot where Grant and Pemberton met, is in the middle of that. Let's see. Maybe if I do a more specific search, I can show you a little better. So this gives you a little bit of a view of what it would have looked like at the time. Let's see if I can find that image. So this is the 3rd Louisiana Redan. This is what the Confederate or the Union had to attack up, and this was after they had dug an approach that gave them a chance to get close, because otherwise they were attacking on a road out in the open. Mississippi Central Time Zone. Yeah, there just isn't a good view of that spot that I can show you guys, unfortunately. If I'd had more time, I would have prepared and had some of the videos ready to go to show you a little bit of it. Okay, here we go. This is the spot I'm trying to show you, and this was back when they removed the trees. This is all grass now. There's no trees here. So let me actually save this. There we go. That's a little better. All right, so this area here, just on the other side of this house, Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe right behind this house is where Grant and Pemberton met when Pemberton was ready to surrender. The 3rd Louisiana Redan is up over in this area here. And so they attacked, this is all ground over which, the Union army's on this side, the Confederate army's up along this ridge here, and it was all entrenchments. It was incredible defensive position that they had. But I have to wrap this up only because I'm getting ready to leave. We have an event at my church tonight, so I'm going a little bit longer than I actually planned to. Thank you guys for joining me. Make sure you have your notifications turned on. I'm going to get episode 1 of my look at the Vicksburg campaign up in the next couple of days. The stuff from the Turkish history will be tomorrow and Tuesday, but expect a lot of Civil War content coming your way in the next couple of weeks. So it's coming. Thank you guys so much, and we'll see you again soon.